Rhizosorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, Rhizosorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And also, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. Well, Wednesday midweek, it is hump day, as some would call it. And the week is unfolding in a very amazing way from a news perspective, trying to get our heads wrapped around what all of the news that happened yesterday means for farmers and ranchers across Canada and the U.S. And so we've been working very hard at that, and we're going to have some further answers for you here today on the program. After yesterday's show, maybe the biggest news, some would say, of all in the cattle industry broke. That is that the Alberta Beef Producers are leaving. They have announced their withdrawal starting in June of 26 from the Canadian Cattle Association. Yeah, that is big news. And their chairperson, Doug Roxburgh, will be with us here today to discuss the why of it. And is there an opportunity to fix this so that they do not leave? It's like 50% of CCA's revenues are coming from ABP. What are the issues? They're in the press release, they mentioned governance and transparency at CCA, but I want Doug to shed some light on that. We're also going to hear today from Chris Davison of the Canola Council of Canada. Lindsay talked to him about these China tariffs and what are the possibilities moving forward on that. Also, Neil Townsend from GrainFox provide the market perspective on those China tariffs and what it means for the canola market. Does this mean we're just more reliant on the U.S. market going forward? Does China need Canadian canola? And we'll also talk today with DC Policy Analyst Jim Wiesemyer. EPA, as I mentioned yesterday, made a big announcement on DEF as well. After yesterday's WASDE report, this puts ever more pressure on the Trump administration to find some actual ag-related trade deals that matter. To me, that says China and India. What does Jim say? We will find out. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got Doug Roxburgh from the ABP standing by right after this.
Kochia sucks.
Big time. And hate it. Really gets in the way. Awful.
But not anymore. Get a head start on tough-to-kill weeds like kochia this fall with Volterra EZ and Fierce EZ soil-active herbicide. Apply after harvest before freeze-up for up to 8 weeks of extended control in pulses, soybeans, and wheat next spring. Volterra EZ, Fierce EZ for kochia. Visit newfarm.ca/kochia.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
The new Brandt XT grain cart delivers unmatched forward auger reach, side auger reach, and discharge spout clearance for easy positioning, with sight lines that allow you to actually see what you're doing while you're doing it, saving you time with each load and getting you back to the combine sooner. They say hindsight is 20/20. We say seeing what's in front of you is better. Lead the field with the new XT grain cart from Brandt.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, from nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast is your place for farm smart topics to boost your profitability. Join Mike Howell on season 4 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrient-economics.com. Okay, as you heard me saying yesterday, what a news day that yesterday was. And we're still trying to, get our arms around some of the details of some of the news that broke yesterday. One of the big pieces of news that broke at the back end of the day was that the Alberta Beef Producers have announced a withdrawal from the Canadian Cattle Association effective in 2026, I think June of 26. Here for the details on the why and what now, it is the chair of ABP. It is Doug Roxburgh. Hey, Doug, how are we doing?
Oh, not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so tell me about your operation. Where do you ranch?
So my wife and I farm just south of Rimbey, Alberta, on the west side of Gull Lake. Cow-calf backgrounder, and we have a direct-to-consumer beef program as well. So.
Oh, nice, cool. Well, I would love to hear more about that direct-to-market, but we got some big fish to fry here, so to speak. Okay, why the announcement yesterday? Why is ABP withdrawing from CCA?
Well, it's a great question, and I think the biggest thing for yourself and for beef producers in Alberta and across Canada to understand, ABP really feels it is important to have a strong national organization. We got into this position here where we're coming to the end of a 3-year funding agreement with CCA, where we've been funding CCA through retained marketings. So a number of years ago, we went through a plebiscite where producers had the ability to pull their dollars back from ABP, and we used to pay CCA on 100% of marketings, and it left ABP in a financial hole, unfortunately. Thankfully, we were able to get this 3-year agreement in place with CCA, and we were able to get in a position where we were financially stable, both at Alberta Beef Producers, but we were able to fund CCA in a way that they were able to also be in a great financial place to do the things that we required. We're coming to the end of that agreement. June 30th, 2026, that agreement wraps up. And so we started the negotiations with CCA quite early, on the sense that we wanted to be really open with CCA, start the discussion, give lots of time. When we went back to the delegates and the membership, it was communicated to us that a new funding agreement wasn't just around looking at the dollars. It was really diving into some of the concerns that our members in Alberta had around things like governance, transparency, and communication from CCA. And so we felt at the executive level at first that maybe this communication with CCA would be mostly focused around strictly funding. We would get the dollars and cents figured out, and we would all be in a great place. But the communication definitely came back that the membership wanted to see things changed more at a governance level. And so when we got to the position of, deciding to pull out, this was not something that happened overnight. This has been a discussion that's been going on as long as I've been around at ABP. Over the last 5 years, it's certainly been communicated. The challenge I think that we found is when we've talked to CCA about making some of the necessary changes in the last number of years, we just haven't seen any movement, any meaningful change. And so we were at a position now where we decided to say to the membership, you know what, we're going to step aside from CCA right now, not as a long-term thing, but simply as a negotiation strategy to give us an ability to say to CCA and say to ABP, what do you guys want from your end, and what does our delegate body want to see on our end? It gave us some space, and it gave us some time that it didn't bind anybody to have to make a snap, rash decision. It allowed us to step back, analyze the situation, hopefully put some of the changes around governance and things like that in place with CCA, have the discussions, and then hopefully we can go forward. Understand that we have approximately 10 months until current funding agreement runs out. And that's a big key point to this. Everybody needs to understand we're not stopping funding CCA today. We've got till the end of June 2026, where we will still honor our agreement with CCA. And our hope is that we can get something in place that maybe this all becomes a moot point long term, and we're able to have a new funding and a new governance agreement going forward, that July 1st, 2026, all this that's been happening today, it just goes away and we continue on.
Okay, so you've answered a few of my questions here. But my initial perception, Doug, was that this looked like a negotiation tactic. Sounds like so definitely there is an opportunity to get off this current trajectory of leaving and negotiate and not leave CCA
100%.
in June of 26?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so there's a couple. So you've hit on a couple of the words that were in the press release yesterday that a lot of people that were texting and calling me, what's going on, they focused on. You mentioned them. First is governance.
Yes.
What needs to change in your mind in relation to governance?
So one of the things, and it's in CCA's bylaws already, it's governance around representation. So right now, Alberta Beef Producers contributes about 55% of the total funds going to CCA. But when you look at our representation by province, Alberta only has 29% of the actual seats or representation currently today. So there had been a freeze during our last negotiations where we froze at 7 seats. We have asked to unfreeze that seat situation and allow us to go back up to the 8 seats that we had previous. But there's a lot of moving that has to happen within some of the other provinces. We're not asking that we need a representation of a full 50 or 55%, but we have to get to a position where we're better covered here in Alberta, because right now we just don't have the representation for voting rights here in Alberta on CCA at a high enough percentage to allow us to be truly represented for how much we physically contribute to CCA.
Transparency. I will tell you that I've left that one second because that's the one that a lot of people are like, what? So explain that.
Yeah, so like right now at ABP, we have a finance chair and we have a full audit committee. Every year, ABP's books are audited by an independent group. We provide that information in detail back to our membership at our annual general meeting. Typically, we'll start to supply some of that during our annual beef producer meetings. I think we did 11 or 12 here in January and February, right across the province. And when we get into ABP or into CCA, CCA today does not have a finance chair in place. So some of the transparency that we're looking for is right now we understand, not just in Alberta, but across Canada, we're going to see reduced marketings going forward. There's just physically less cattle in the country. And because we have these less cattle in the country, we're understanding, even at ABP, that we maybe have to be a little bit more fiscally responsible with our dollars because there's just less dollars to go around. Because we don't have that transparency with CCA to get information back as to how some of this money is being spent that we contribute, we really struggle with CCA to get a clear picture of saying, if you guys aren't going to kind of rein in spending through some of these periods of time when, we're maybe at a place where we have less marketings, how are we going to navigate this? And we keep coming back to CCA and asking for that information. That transparency right now on the fiscal management just isn't there.
So I just want to clarify, for some people have interpreted that there is the use of the word transparency is being used in the fact that you're concerned that money is being spent inappropriately. But what you're saying there is that you just want to know where it's being spent. Like, can you just
by all means, I don't believe in any way we're accusing CCA of inappropriately spending funds. But I think the transparency is where are some of the funds going? And if CCA is going to require the thought around more funding going forward and looking to increase their budget, we do have some concerns around that. There was a big focus a few years ago around some environmental work with the government, and ABP kind of pushed back on some of that work. We were seeing a lot of resources being directed that way, and we were looking for what the costs were in some of that, and we just weren't getting that feedback that we were looking for to have a clear picture of where the dollars were going.
Just sidestepping here and just looking at it from maybe a little bit higher level.
Yep.
Do ABP and CCA have major policy differences? Can you comment on that?
No, I think overall we're here to advocate for the cattle industry. I know CCA certainly works at the federal level, but ABP has done a lot to work at more of the provincial, or I'm going to say at the state level. ABP has communicated and visited a lot with a lot of U.S. states, and we've translated that information up to CCA to help build stronger relationships. We certainly understand we've been going through a tariff concern here with our largest trading partner in the U.S., so we've certainly been working alongside CCA to strengthen those ties. And I don't believe that we're on different paths. I think ultimately what we're looking for in certain situations, at least coming out of Alberta, is we're just looking for Alberta to have the fair say in some of the decisions that are being made, simply because we do represent such a large portion of the industry.
What happens if we don't leave this trajectory, then what?
Yeah, so I guess there's two parts to that. Again, I reinstate that, we gave CCA a kind of a 10-month runway on the hope that we can get something done. Within Alberta, funds that traditionally would have been passed on to CCA will remain in Alberta, but it's not to fund ABP directly. ABP has already put together a really strategic plan moving forward, and we'll present more of that detail going forward, but we'll be in a position where we'll be able to fund and work alongside CCA at more of a national level coming out of Alberta. So those funds are still going to be coming in, still going to be utilized for global trade, things like that. But I think it's also really important to understand that none of the funding stops for important programs like BCRC. Right now, today, Andrea and her team down at Beef Cattle Research Council, a portion of their funding comes out of Alberta. Project funding comes out of Alberta as well. Public stakeholder and relations, that's a program run through CCA. None of that funding stops. That all continues whether we get a new agreement or not, because it comes out of the national checkoff levy. So really important to understand that, there's kind of multiple parts to all of this. Yep. CCA, I think, will be the one that'll have to figure out long-term if we can't come to a long-term agreement, because they will be the ones that will lose a significant portion of their funding going forward. But I really hope that in this position, it gives us the ability to rectify this and get back on path.
So for the people who aren't living every day in cattle politics, Doug, what wouldn't be funded in that situation?
So more of the work that's done on Capitol Hill. Right now, CCA has a representative that works off the Hill. CCA has an office up there. They talk more with, John Barlow, Heath McDonald, our current federal ag minister. They have more of that direct communication. It's not to undermine any of that work that's been done. I will say that the staff at Alberta Beef Producers thus far has had great communication with MPs, senators. So it would be more working at that national level. And I think in terms of, some of our global trade, we still rely on organizations like Canada Beef to do some of that global trade. I know the team and Brody Hogan, our past chair of ABP, they were just over in the Philippines and Vietnam here working on global trade. That was something, again, ABP teamed up with some of our national organizations. So I don't think it's about overriding or it's about sidestepping. I think it's about working in tandem. It's just, ultimately we would like to see it where we're just one unified voice for sure.
Are you confident? Maybe give me a probability. Maybe that's unfair. I'm just curious your level of confidence here that you're going to be able to find a deal with CCA.
I would say, I never say never, but I truly do firmly believe we will get this figured out. I have no qualms about that whatsoever. Tyler Fulton, the current chair of CCA, the staff, the great people they have working around them, I think we'll be able to sit down, negotiate this. Unfortunately, some people said, why did this need to become public? Why did this not happen behind closed doors? The challenge back that I'll put to that is over the last 5 years, we've really worked with CCA in the background to try to rectify some of these problems. We just haven't been able to get there. And unfortunately, we had to kind of push it over the edge here to where we're at today to hopefully make some of this happen. But I truly believe the team at CCA and the group we have at ABP will make something work here. So.
Yeah, you made some sense of this. You've done a good job of explaining your position here for sure, Doug. It's and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you feel that CCA has been an effective lobby organization. The issue is behind the scenes in regards to those two things you said, governance and transparency.
Yeah. No, they've done great work. Again, Dennis Daudet and Tyler Fulton were just recently back in Washington. They've done a lot of work. We're just maybe looking to bring the standard of operations up to a little bit higher standard here today.
Hey, Doug, I appreciate you joining us here today. I know things are busy on the ranch as well as probably a lot of discussions around these negotiations. So thank you so much for joining us here today. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
If you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you, the audience. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. We've got more coming up here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Everyone has questions about their farm. From general inquiries to in-depth fertilizer questions, it can be hard to find straightforward answers. let alone ones that apply to your operation. That's exactly why Economics was created. Our team sifts through the endless stream of agronomic information so you don't have to, providing relevant answers, one-of-a-kind tools, and easy-to-implement advice all in one place. Find your answers at nutrient-economics.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Dairy producers are wanted for the first American Dairy Expo. It's exciting. November 5th and 6th at the Champlain Valley Exposition in Vermont. Grab a free breakfast, tour the 200 Company Dairy Innovation Trade Show, meet Olympian and dairy producer Elle St. Pierre, and take in the Dairy Delivers Classroom. Full details. And there's also a discount coupon and pre-expo tickets at AmericanDairyExpo.com. Ooh, Vermont in the fall. Beautiful. Okay, fresh off of China's announcement of new tariffs on Canadian canola seed, Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture had a chance to catch up with Chris Davison of the Canola Council of Canada. Here's that conversation.
Yeah, what was announced today was a preliminary finding that's part of the anti-dumping investigation that China initiated last September into the imports of Canadian canola seed. And what was announced essentially is the imposition of a 75.8% duty to be collected as a deposit on imports of canola seed into China.
Now, 75.8%, first of all, a large number. Second of all, kind of an odd one. Why do we think that it is at that level? Is there any feedback as to why this number and why such a large tariff?
Yeah, look, so still very early into these this finding having been communicated. So we need to dive a little deeper into that. But I suspect that the Chinese government, in reviewing the information that was submitted as part of the investigation and whatever analysis they did, made some decisions about how to come up with that number based on the information they would have received from ourselves and other parties to the investigation. But as for the specifics of that and the rationale for that, that'll be a follow-up conversation once we understand and have a chance to go through the preliminary ruling in some detail.
So two parts to that then, of course. China is, as I say, calling this preliminary or temporary. It does seem to stem from, in this anti-dumping investigation, they refer to findings regarding subsidies of the Canadian system. Is there any indication what those subsidies may be or what China is, in particular, is taking issue with?
No, and I'm not going to speculate that other than to say I would obviously disagree with that finding. But as for the preliminary nature of this that you alluded to, there often is a preliminary finding as part of an anti-dumping investigation. This particular investigation started last September, and under the normal course of investigations, they last for a year, so it would have been due to be completed this September, although there is the possibility under certain circumstances for extension of an investigation by up to 6 months. And often a preliminary finding is found earlier in the process than what we've experienced with the announcement today. So the fact that it's preliminary is not unfounded. It's a typical part of anti-dumping investigations. But suffice to say, we're very disappointed with what was announced, and particularly the significance of the duty that was announced and the impact it will have on the Canadian industry.
So further to that, then, as far as the timeline goes, a year would be next month. But as you're saying, it could be another 6 months after sort of that year. So we could be looking at a final finding somewhere in the next 6 to 7 months, potentially.
Yes, that's possible. If there's a decision to extend this investigation, that would be a possibility. I would still think that we will anticipate getting some additional clarity on where things stand based on the original September timeframe. So as you alluded to, that's not very far from now. We're talking about 3 or 4 weeks from now, based on the date that this anti-dumping investigation was first initiated.
Now, this is, of course, on canola seed. We did see China extend tariffs onto Canadian meal and canola oil. This sort of rounds out the trifecta then. What are we talking as far as value into China? I know meal and oil were, the lower of the value that would go into China. Canola seed being the largest. So what kind of value are we talking about would typically go into China that could be subject to this tariff?
Yeah, look, this is a market that was valued at $4.9 billion in 2024. It's the second largest export market for the Canadian canola industry in terms of its economic value. In terms of the breakdown of those exports, about $4 billion are tied to the export of seed, another $920 million plus or minus to meal, and then another $20 million plus or minus related to oil, based on 2024 activity. So a very, very significant market. We've talked about China being a highly valued market, and that the Canadian canola industry for many years and will continue to work hard to meet the needs of Chinese customers and China's food security needs. But with this finding and the imposition of a 75.8% duty on canola seed, together with the existing 100% duties on Canadian canola oil and meal, this will effectively close the Chinese market to the Canadian canola industry.
Now, this is set to take effect August 14th, just in 2 days. What is the Canola Council asking the Canadian government to do at this time?
Yeah, look, I think there's two main things. One is we absolutely have to double down on our efforts to resolve these trade issues. We all know that Canada-China relations has come through an extended period of time where those relations have not been particularly good. We were encouraged by some modest but recent developments that had increased engagement between Canada and China. And clearly we need to double down and redouble those efforts. We've been very clear that this is a political issue and it needs a political solution. So that is a big part of the ask to the Canadian government. The second ask really relates to support for the Canadian industry. This is an industry that contributes about $44 billion annually to the Canadian economy. It accounts for more than 200,000 jobs and $16 billion in wages. It is, quite frankly, an economic powerhouse. And we are facing sort of, potentially an unprecedented closure of this market. And so we are going to need appropriate support from the Government of Canada. And, that will, from our position, take a couple of forms. There will be financial support specifically, and then we'll see what other supports may be appropriate in terms of policy or programming. But absolutely, the magnitude of this is very significant.
Mm-hmm. All right. Chris Davison, President and CEO of the Canola Council of Canada, thank you so much for taking time today.
When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to talk to Neil Townsend of GrainFox, get his thoughts on the impacts on the canola markets based on China's announcement.
At Proven Seed, we know that farming in Western Canada doesn't just teach us, it shapes us. Here we face challenges with resilience, innovation, and grit born from decades of experience. We battle the conditions again and again because growing crops here isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We're raised to adapt just like you. with varieties grown specifically for your local conditions. Visit provenseed.ca/race to adapt to hear our story.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. Big announcement this week by China to now apply 76% tariff on Canadian canola seed. And this is a major issue. We heard earlier from Chris Davison of the Canola Council of Canada to talk about this and some of the impacts there. But let's break it down from a market perspective. We're joined right now by Neil Townsend of GrainFox, based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Neil, how are we doing?
Well, under the circumstances, personally, I'm doing well, but it's, pretty disappointing trying to, navigate farmers and farmers' best interests through all of the myriad of challenges we're facing in 25-26, including politics writ large.
Yeah. Mark, futures down heavily on Tuesday on the news. When China announced the tariff, the 100% tariff on meal and oil back in March, the market dropped, and then it proceeded to rally and actually bust right through where the price was on that Friday night announcement. Can we expect a repeat performance here?
Well, yes, it's possible. I mean, is it probable? I'm still calculating those probabilities. But, the bottom line is that canola, not just in Canada, but globally, is relatively tight. And, Stats Canada gave us some more canola that had to be done. But if you just look at like 25-26, I mean, the pattern that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years should be repeated just on a supply and demand basis, maybe in somewhat of a vacuum without the politics. But even with the politics, and we faced political challenges before in canola, and canola's done okay. I mean, maybe not as good as it would have done without the politics, but it's done okay. And I still think that if you just kind of try to balance the demand and supply for canola, you get into a situation where the last 6 months of this marketing year will be very similar to the last 6 months of the previous marketing year, where that, there's a bigger demand than there is ready supply, which kind of keeps the price sort of sustained. But obviously, Shaun, I mean, so many things are in motion right now. And, is China going to consume the same amount of canola? Because if they want to consume the same amount of canola, then they need to get it from somewhere. They'll be from, largely from Australia or possibly the Black Sea. So, it's going to be interesting.
What are they using the canola for? Like, are South American soybeans a substitute?
Well, I mean, they use it for a variety of things. Like, there's definitely, if you go to a Chinese grocery store in China, the veg oil section is much, much larger than it is in a North American grocery store. And a lot of the processed oils or the crushed oils or whatever you want to say, like they're advertised for different, things that people appreciate. And when I've been to China, like canola oil definitely has a space on the shelf there where it's advertised as being heart healthy. It's advertised as being, better for you, right? So there are some front of the box claims for canola oil. Now I can't, I didn't test all the oils to see if that was exactly what was in the containers. You never see soybean oil on the shelf. It's always just a veg oil blend. It's sort of the lowest common denominator. Now, obviously, a lot of the stuff is used in sort of like, industrial purposes or food processing. The one other unique aspect of canola, and, I'm not an expert in this field, but aquaculture. And in fact, when they wrote about canola being banned, aquaculture was mentioned in all of the articles sort of that had originated from the press in China. And what I've been told about the aquaculture is that it's both aspects, both the meal and the oil are used in the aquaculture. And the one thing that I remember speaking with members of this about 7 or 8 years ago, members of COFCO in Beijing and talking about the aquaculture. And the one thing they said to me was that the juvenile fish mortality rate was much lower if they used a feed mix that included the canola as sort of one of the main ingredients in that fish food. So, that's an economic aspect to it. And with the mortality rate, I mean, I assume maybe they'll keep using it, but, again, they can adapt. They have extra crushing capacity and they have a lot of abilities to kind of, show resilience when they're faced with, something that costs too much, right?
Does Australia have the supply to make it happen for them? And what does that mean? What does that mean going forward for canola exports?
Yeah, I mean, if Australia wanted to solely export their canola production to China, I mean, they would probably just have enough to satisfy China's, import demand, what they did in 24-25. But that would mean that, all of their other countries that they were exporting to, Australia would no longer be able to service. And of course, Australia is sort of, we don't know exactly what the growing season is going to be like in Australia for, September, October, and November. So, I mean, if they end up with a shorter crop, which they've ended up with before, that could also sort of intensify the thing. The other thing is the Australians, they don't really carry over canola or anything to any great regard because of, the environment down there. It's sort of a just-in-time delivery service. They harvest it and they ship most of it to the ports and then get it on boats and out. So, I think there is an opportunity for Canada, at least say it's 2.5 million tons. Let's say that Australia incrementally puts back into China, and they haven't been exporting to China for some time. They've just got a few test cargoes so far, but let's just say it's 2.5 million tons. I mean, that 2.5 million tons would have to come from somewhere because there's some uncovered demand at that point. So Canada will backfill that. And even if we backfill 80 or 90% of that is some mitigation. Right now, a lot of those markets, people will argue, are not as premium as the Chinese market. Maybe more sailing days, a little bit more costs involved. But, the net impact of that is that, Canada, it's not going to be a zero-sum game exactly, but we're going to be able to export more to other places.
One of the ironies or coincidences here, Neil, is at a time where, from a trade perspective, we've heard the Prime Minister say, hey, elbows up and trade diversification. We're actually becoming more reliant on the U.S. market when it comes to canola potentially.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you mentioned the elbows up and the trade thing. There is a bottom line issue here for Canadian farmers. And this covers a lot of areas, and particularly for Western Canadian grain farmers. We need market access, right? And we've been talking about this probably since the very start of your career in agriculture, the start of my career in agriculture. And I think there was a moment there, maybe, in the, 2015, 2014, where we thought, okay, things are going to be better. Market access is going to be, trade seems to be very popular in the world. People want to trade. People are understanding, that there's advantages, like Canada can grow canola better than some other places and that kind of thing. But here we are in 2025. And, if I'm just trying to make a plan as an analyst, and even if I was trying to make a plan as a farmer, I mean, do we really know what the last 6 months of this marketing year will be like politically? And with China, I think Canada needs to get this resolved. We need to sit down with China. And I mean, is it, who are we protecting if we have 100% tariff on Chinese EVs? How big is that industry in Canada that we're protecting? And are we actually protecting something that's really more U.S. based? And the U.S. is antagonistic towards us right now. So I think it's obviously like a multivariable, system right now. But I think with China, we got to get to a system, or we got to get to a place where we become trade partners. We need these other countries. And even with the energy that we're producing on the West Coast, or be able to access off the West Coast, from Alberta mostly. But, China is going to be one of the main markets for that. So shouldn't we have a better relationship with China? So I think there's some compatibility here. Now, final point, one thing that always strikes me with China and Canada is I don't think China thinks they're dealing with an equal when they talk with Canada. I think they think Canada is a little bit annoying and they should fall in line and do what China wants. And one aspect of the way Donald Trump is treating Canada is that reinforces that idea to China. China is always aware of what's happening in the press, what's being said from the White House, and sort of the way that, we've been just verbiage about Canada from the U.S. and Trump. It's just being very disrespectful, and it doesn't exactly, if you were just compiling articles, you'd say, well, is Canada really that important? Like the U.S. is saying they're not that important. And I think on the canola front, on the world spring wheat side, and pulses and energy and a lot of other things, lumber, like Canada is very important. The only problem from a Canadian perspective is we absolutely need markets to ship those things to.
Great stuff. Neil Townsend, GrainFox, based out of Winnipeg. Neil, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable, hybrid fall rye seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave. Go to fpgenetics.ca. We're back with more of RealAg Radio right after this. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
There is lots happening in the world of agriculture, and here to get some perspective out of Washington, D.C., it is DC Policy Analyst Jim Wiesemyer. Hey, Jim, how are we doing?
Really good. We had that shocker USDA report for corn, beans, and even cotton on that, and we're going to see the market consequences for months.
Yeah, we're kind of, well, maybe not kind of. It feels like we're really in a supply box at this point, searching for as much demand as possible to weave our way out of this. This puts more pressure on President Trump than ever, doesn't it, to find some actual trade deals related to ag commodities?
It does. They have to start focusing on ag more now. The National Corn Growers Association this morning is having a presser urging just that, Shaun, and also renewed push for year-round permanent E15 for ethanol, something they said could really significantly increase the utilization of corn. Either way, whether the yield of corn eventually goes down, the demand is still a big question mark. We still have way too much corn. So from a market perspective, and I'm a policy outlook person, not a commodity outlook person, but all the logic tells me market rallies should be sold. In the case of soybeans, we got a friendly number, so farmers have an opportunity to hedge in some prices here, at least above $10 on the board. But Brazil is going to plant a month from now, basically in earnest. So the higher you go in U.S. soybean prices, the more potentially Brazil could plant for their new crop.
What are the policy, is there policy impacts related to yesterday's WASDE, or is it just way too early for that?
No, it's never too early for policy. The lower you go on price, the more you pay out in farm program payments, especially for corn, because corn can bust the bank. I mean, it just, Paul Neiffer said this downward adjustment for corn that USDA made, $3.6 billion more. Now, corn farmers won't see that until October 2026, but that season average, marketing year average price has a long ways to go. But that's one implication, more program payments. So that's a mini hedge, if you will, from a policy perspective. Two, as you said, it puts pressure on the Trump administration, USDA, USTR, our trade rep, to ink more trade agreements. The biggest one I see by the end of the year that could turn around the markets would be any U.S.-China new trade agreement. And if you see Trump meeting with Xi Jinping personally, I think the odds are high that they'll say they have a framework agreement. Now that could happen October, November, December this year, but that's one to look out in the future. Now, where's the funding going to come from if this really gets ugly from a price situation? One, input costs are going to go lower. Fertilizer prices, they can't justify them not with corn prices the way they are. Interest rates will be coming down. Probably 2, if not 3 cuts between now and the end of the year. 3, the White House is garnering, $30 billion in tariff revenues just for July. They stand at $140 billion already for this fiscal year, with the forecast of $300 billion in tariff revenues. Now, let's not get into the argument of who's paying for that. That's money. Now, USDA, although it's a year lag, has 35% of that funding for what we call Section 32. Usually it's used for food aid, some farmer payments, but they can adjust that. So to me, that's eventually going to be a Trump administration ATM machine wherever they need it. So watch that for the future. It's like the Commodity Credit Corporation, even with more money. So don't think we don't have the money to do a lot of things.
Yeah, and just a reminder, everybody, the Commodity Credit Corporation, the CCC, was that was the mechanism that was used during the first Trump administration for those MFP payments related to the trade issues battle with China during that time period. It's kind of curious. You mentioned that, Jim. That money's being spent like 3 times over. That tariff revenue. We're paying down the debt. We're doing all these things. The deficit's not going down.
No, it's $37 trillion, our current debt.
That's wow.
And look at, we better get lower interest rates because we're spending a lot of money just to service that debt. But look around the world. Let's connect dots as we always do, Shaun. Not only is the U.S. sector, farmer sector, pleading for aid here from a trade policy and a price perspective, but look at your country.
Yeah.
Your prime minister has already announced some gimmies to the lumber industry.
Yep, steel aluminum.
Your canola is going to argue for it because of the China angle. So you're going to see this around the world. Look at Brazil. I mean, they're going to announce something, I think, by the end of this week, how to deal with the non-exempted tariffs, because the Trump administration put 50% tariffs, and they could even go higher. The most important one, orange juice has an exemption, but beef, we import a lot of hamburger from Brazil, and that's sky high right now, and that's adding to the upward thrust in cattle prices.
Yeah, this isn't just a U.S. supply issue. There's a lot of countries searching for demand right now, and I think there's a connection between the Canadian canola situation, as China applies 76% tariffs on canola seed, already on top of the 100% tariffs on meal and oil, along with pork and seafood. China doesn't need Canadian canola right now. Just like they're saying to the market, we don't want, or we've tried not to want, U.S. soybeans. As export sales in the first half of the year, they're down 50% compared to 2024 from the U.S. to China. China's looking to South America right now for supply, and that's a problem for the Canadian and American farmer.
It is. And USDA held with their current estimate of Brazil soybeans for 25-26, but the trade is 5 to 8 million tons higher. So, I mean, for corn, I should say.
Yep.
So we could see a lot more corn coming out of Brazil. But here's another angle that I take a lot of calls on China, like they don't need this stuff. Here's what China could possibly do. They could import a lot more of U.S. Products if there is an agreement, and then they can, quote, give a number of their commodities as food aid to a number of countries. So there's a food aid connection on this one relative to China. Don't think that they won't, because that's just a multi-billion-dollar food aid package for China. They think strategically that way.
You know, going into yesterday morning, Tuesday, I was kind of excited, mostly generated by you. I blame you, Jim. I was mostly excited about the fact that, you know, EPA was going to make this announcement relative to DEF. And I was all prepared. That was going to be the story of the day. I was going to write an opinion column and do all this stuff. And then hell broke loose on a number of fronts. Now, this is like when I read what EPA released, my first reaction, the word that came to me was reasonable. Is that fair?
It's absolutely fair. I'll tell you, I'm getting ready to go to a Minnesota Ag Leadership Conference meeting next week in Stillwater, Minnesota. Beautiful area. And I'm putting together some Q&As to interview myself at my PowerPoint. Okay. And one of the questions I get asked all the time, who are the stars of Trump's cabinet? Well, number one is Scott Bessent. Because he has to, you know, he's been excellent. He has to deal with an impulsive president called Trump, and he's respected by the trade, by the financial community. Two is Lee Zeldin, EPA administrator. I have never in my 50-year career would have put any EPA administrator as a star in any cabinet.
You weren't a fan of Andrew Wheeler? Like, what are you talking about?
Why do I say that? He has been so farmer friendly and energy friendly that I've ever seen. The reason, he listens to his boss, and I've never seen a pro ag president like Trump. If he's focused on agriculture, he'll do what agriculture wants. So yes, to answer your question, it's very pragmatic. And I didn't think that was a word that EPA understood at all over the decades.
Yeah. And I think on this one, this is an example. I think it starts even earlier, because how did the message get to the president in the first place? And I think that actually starts with, I think it starts with Rawlins. I think Secretary Rawlins has been, you know, I remember a top producer summit going back to the springtime, you know, having those roundtables, and she had numerous farmer roundtables and farmers of a wide spectrum of political opinion, by the way, as well. And I know at the top producer roundtable, this issue around DEF and Tier 4 engines, it came up.
Yeah.
And so I think it starts with Rawlins, and it worked its way through, but it takes initiative and commitment to actually see it through. And what I noticed yesterday, I'm sure there's some activists that are going crazy and the world's going to blow up because of, you know, the lack of commitment to emissions reductions. But, you know, to have a semi-trailer, a tractor trailer on the side of the interstate stopped because of DEF issues or running out, or a tractor during planting time, it just seems kind of, it doesn't seem balanced. And so giving more time, weeks, I think it's up to a month on some of the categories, just makes sense to me.
It does. And this is the either reduced regulation or more realistic regulations that was really paramount in Trump 1.0. And now they're maximizing that in Trump 2.0. Trump is unlike any president I've ever covered, and I've been up here since Nixon days, okay? Because he is so unusual because of the speed at which he wants to make decisions. That doesn't mean he doesn't listen to people, but he's bored with multi-meetings or 3 meetings on one topic. He is used to corporations where, hey, this is a problem. Give me options. Let's make a decision. He's non-governmental in that perspective. So that's why you see so many fast decisions, and he doesn't tap that many people. But he does listen. He's the National Economic Council of Economic Advisors. Kevin Hassett.
Yep.
So you and I see that accelerating in the months ahead.
Yeah, and in some applications, I think that really serves him very well, whether you agree with the outcome or not. But I think it serves well. This meeting with Russia and Alaska, that is one where I'm not sure it does. I'm a little bit worried about or what the expectation is that's going to come out of this, but it has impact on the commodity market because the end of that war, brings potentially more supply back on stream. Or maybe opens things up again, less sanctions on Russia. I'm not really sure. That Russia has some pretty tall demands, including, wanting no peacekeeping, for example. It's not just about territory. It's about, what can actually happen in Ukraine from a weapons standpoint. This is something we'll be following very closely over the weekend. It's going to keep both of us working.
Well, what's the ag angle on this? One is, this is Trump 101. He wants to meet he sizes people up, but he's got to be with them. And that's one of his strengths. He's got to have that person or people in the room. And recall that in his first term, North Korea, he walked out of any agreement with North Korea. Now, what's the market significance of this? This will be in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, the White House is downplaying any major takeaways from this Friday. If there is an agreement, what would it be? And you think China isn't watching? Because if China senses any weakness on the part of Trump, what does that mean about Taiwan? Right. There's your ag. There's the market significant. China is sitting at that table, even though Xi Jinping is not there. So, and it does make a difference. Europe is involved as well. They should. Trump is going to brief shortly thereafter in a nanosecond the European officials, Ukrainian leadership, etc. This is more of, I want to see if Putin is actually wants peace. Recall, Russia's economy is a war economy right now. He actually wants it to continue. Putin is nervous about the Russian economy if there is a ceasefire, if the war ends, because if it doesn't, sanctions with meat, because he's been able to get around them. But if you're seeing what Trump is doing with India from a trade perspective, the energy purchases they're making from Russia, that could also get into China politics too. That's all involved in this Friday meeting, how it turns out.
Jim, on these trade deals, we don't have, I guess, trade peace between Canada and the U.S. That's been sort of parked. At least for the time being, it seems, till I heard Treasury Secretary Bissett say till the fall. And with you combine that with the WASDE report that we have and the supply that's out there, Canada, for example, doesn't solve some of those supplies. They already buy a lot of these commodities. It's really China and India. So isn't all of the focus as applies to agriculture should really be pointed in that direction, correct?
I agree. And Brazil, because of their significance in the trading community and with the U.S. We have a surplus with Brazil, and look how we're treating them. Yeah. On Canada and Mexico, I just don't. Personally, I think that they've gone the wrong way. It's called North American market. We've talked about that before. 85 to 90% of the products are protected, thank goodness, via the whatever you call it, but we call it USMCA. Yeah. But this could tie into the renegotiation of USMCA. I read the excellent, I like the Canada Globe and Mail, and they've had editorials, opinions about, we're not necessarily thinking the U.S. wants to continue this agreement. So that's still laying out there, but we've got many months for that. July in the formal negotiations. But I think, yeah, it will be into the fall, and I would listen to Scott Bessent on the timeline on Canada and Mexico. But there are allies, and eventually Trump should come around to that North American market.
Great stuff. Hey, Jim, fantastic. Really appreciate you joining us here today.
Anytime, Shaun.
That was Jim Wiesemyer, DC Policy Analyst. That was Jim Wiesemyer, DC Policy Analyst, a great friend of the show. If you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Tomorrow, we're going to get the farmer perspective of all of this and find out how we're making out as we head into Harvest 2025 for the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seed Canada. So don't miss tomorrow's show whatsoever as we hear from the farmers. Okay, thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.